but I'm going to do our video first. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Creative Lifescaping, my weekly interview series with people who are in non-traditionally creative roles and who use their creativity every day. It is my extreme pleasure today to bring on our guest, Steve Rader. So I met Steve through an open talent organization group, and Steve is the program manager for the NASA Tournament Lab and the Center for Excellence for Collaboration. And they were working to infuse challenge and crowdsourcing into innovation approaches at NASA, which I think is very innovative to bring crowdsourcing approaches into such a large organization. So I can't wait to hear more about that. They focus on the study and use of curated crowdsourcing communities that utilize prize and challenge-based methods to deliver innovative solutions for NASA and the US government. In 2015, Steve was named as one of the 20 challenge mentors for U.S. Government Services Administration's Prizes and Challenges government-wide community of practice. Steve has worked with various projects and organizations to develop and execute over 100 different challenges. He speaks regularly about NASA's work in crowd-based challenges and the future of work, both publicly and internally, to the NASA workforce to promote the use of open innovation tools. So Steve's a fellow speaker, and I'm so excited to learn more about his mechanical engineering degree from Rice University. He's also worked at NASA's Johnson Space Center for 32 years. Wow. So Steve was probably, when I worked in Florida, and oh no, Johnson Space Center, that's probably not the Florida one. I used to watch the shuttles take off when I lived in Florida. Worked in mission control, flight software development for the Space Shuttle and International Space Station, command and control systems development for the X-38, and led the command, control, communications, and information architecture definition for the Constellation program. So I am so thrilled that Steve's taken time out of his day to join me today. Welcome, Steve.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
So one of the reasons I thought we'd be really interesting to chat with you today is because you kind of combine these two worlds of art and science in a very innovation-based way, and using your creativity to build systems for NASA. But I'd like to know, tell me a little bit about your journey to what interested you in becoming an engineer in the first place, and how did that develop through to working for NASA?
Sure. So yeah, I coming out of high school, I really enjoyed physics, and one day they had this kind of tour of an engineering facility, be an engineer for a day, and I did that and came out of it thinking, this kind of taps into my creative side. I'm fairly good at the nerdy physics and math part, and so when I discovered Rice, I went. Applied to Rice, got in, and went down the mechanical engineering path. Honestly, the mechanical engineering part was because everyone needs a mechanical engineer, so there was a lot of job security, I think, in that path. And as I was interviewing for jobs when graduating, I didn't really have NASA on my radar, which is fascinating because as a kid, I dressed up as an astronaut. I shot off Estes rockets growing up. I was very into space, but I had a preconception that was beyond my capability, that was only for PhDs and only for those at the top notch at their game. And they had some folks come and interview students on site at Rice. And in that conversation, I realized, they need engineers. They need really people who are of lots of different disciplines to make that enterprise work. And so I applied, and they were hiring flight controllers for the space station that was yet to be built. And I went in as environmental control and life support system flight controller. And it was really interesting. And so I've loved it every bit of the way, and changed jobs quite a bit within that. But it's been a great experience.
Well, I love that you said that it tapped into your creative side. So it sounds like you already knew that you had a creative side before you went into engineering. Tell me more about that.
Sure. Well, I'm a musician as well, so I play jazz, bass, and have always enjoyed that aspect of being able to kind of tap into that. I'm not a natural musician, so I have to work at it. But I think that was part of it. I learned I had to be a little bit. I had to work at it, and that it's not something that just the light bulb comes on, but you've got to actually put yourself out there. You've got to kind of take steps to learn new things and then put those things together. But yeah, I think I tend to like to be creative. Finding the opportunities is actually the hardest part.
Yeah. Well, I can't imagine using your creative side. And I love what you said about being creative is a chance to learn and that you have to work at it. It doesn't come naturally. So an opportunity to build a new space station. What was that like?
Oh, well,
Or build a new program. Sorry, I
yeah.
might have misunderstood.
It's always exciting. You get drawn in very quickly into kind of the mundane parts of that. Just coming up with the lists and integrating across groups and the harder aspects of that. And that's one of the things you discover in engineering and in projects in general. And one of the reasons innovation is so hard in organizations is innovation and that creativity part really only accounts for a small slice, like 1%. And the 99% of the effort goes into integrating and making things happen and purchasing and getting schedules going and all of those kinds of things. And yet what that one slice is, like that 1% of discovering and what your starting point in terms of technology and concept and creativity, all of those things are what determine how good that end product's going to be and how well it's going to perform. And so there's this really kind of dual thing that happens that you have to balance, where you better be investing in finding those right technologies and really being creative and innovative. But guess what? It's not the bulk of what you're going to have to do. And so having an organization that's good at both is really tough, because they're spending 99% of their time on this other part that is really important. But if you don't spend the time over here, you get into a spot where you produce the suboptimal, right? You produce things that are incrementally better, but not disruptively better, right?
Yeah, and I wonder, would it be fair, like as you're saying that, it makes me think of that idea of when you set a course on a ship, and if you're trying to go across the ocean and you set your course like slightly off, you'll end up in completely the wrong place. Is it kind of that type of idea? You have to, and so when you're looking at the 99%, it's easy to quantify that work. I find that it's busy work. So tell me, how do you do the other part well, the 1% slice? Because do you think it's different, how you approach the work of each?
It is so different. And in fact, we get a lot of pushback from organizations when we try to introduce innovation methods, because innovation is really sideways to production. If you're trying to get something out on budget and on time, somebody raising their hand with a creative question in the middle of your meeting is not helpful. It is actually disruptive. It's going to delay you more. Innovation costs money, but it also has to come at the right time, right? And so you get people that have been beaten down in those meetings because they have all these ideas, but there's no time for them. The context is not right. And so then when there comes a time when you need it, they won't actually give you their ideas because they're trained, right? I'm not going to give you my ideas. And it's very much that only the experts can talk, and everything has to be a certain way. In the creative environment, you have to set a different stage. There are no bad ideas. Like, here's the problem. Innovation, when it comes to ideas and technologies and the real things that are going to make a big difference beyond just incremental, they don't just sit there on the surface. You have to actually be able to listen to and think about ideas that will never work. And it's not until you actually explore ideas that won't actually work and you get 3 deep that you find the one that does. And so if you're not willing to listen and to accept kind of as input anything, then you kind of limit your chances. A lot of people also love to jump into the solution space, which is great. That's the most fun. I found the solution. But there's a great Einstein quote that said if I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and understanding it, and 5 minutes solving it. And I think there's real wisdom in that. And so we really try to in that setting the stage for innovation, say, look, let's train you on better problem understanding. We have frame breaking exercises where we take and say, look, what if these assumptions aren't true anymore? What have you bounded your problem with? And can we kind of start to peel that back before we start to look at solutions to understand what is keeping us here, and what is the performance? What is in fact the performance of your current baseline, so that you can understand what better performance looks like. And it's amazing how much that's not been done in a lot of cases. So I think that whole setting the stage for creativity is important. But then also, our tendency is to want to brainstorm on a whiteboard, right? Get everybody up there and they start writing their solutions. And there's good research out there that says when you do that, as soon as somebody writes one idea up there, you've now limited your ideas significantly, because now people are now going down a certain path or certain kind of construct. And so we try to set the stage differently, where we don't let that happen up front. And then we recognize a key thing that's happening in the world today that's key is that if you're going to innovate, it's not about just you as an individual, because the technology landscape out there and the new skills and the new expertise out there is beyond comprehension of what most people had. 20 years ago, if you wanted to start a new design, you could talk to some vendors, go to some conferences, talk to some experienced folks, and based on that, know with certainty what the latest and greatest technology you needed for your project, and to be able to go and then start your innovation based on that, right? It was the starting point. And then you could spend that 99%, that 3 years developing it for getting it flight certified. And at the end of that time, it would still be valid and still be cutting edge. That's not the case anymore. Things are changing. What I tell people is it's not just that there's so much technology out there, it's the pace. The pace is now breaking all of those old ways of doing things. And so if quantum sensors are going to be the solution, and you know nothing about them and have nobody that has expertise in that, but it could be a game changer for you, what does that mean for you? Well, you need to be able to access people that understand those things. You need to be able to access the technologies that can actually help you. And what we find is, because there's so much technology out there, and by the way, I use this all the time to just illustrate that. If you look at the number of scientists that are alive today, 90% of all scientists that have ever lived throughout human history are alive today. 9 times more than the whole rest of the time. So we don't even appreciate just how much, and a lot of these technologies are building block technologies, 3D printing, CRISPR, machine learning, robotics. All of these are cheaper to learn, cheaper to implement, and because they're agnostic to industry, they're not specific to a given industry, they are developing across all industries. And so they're actually getting these permutations of technologies. So when we say, I need a starting point to innovate, you actually need a way to go out and find the experts, the folks that can connect the dots, the folks that can bring those to bear, so that then you can take that and start to do the hard innovation of actually implementing that and getting it to a solution you can use. And what we found is crowds are really good at that. You can have individuals or even teams work on that, and they'll get this kind of little bit of that landscape. But when you turn the crowd on, it acts like this huge dragnet across all industries. And you just are able to find both the deep expertise and the diversity necessary to identify those ideas, technologies, and concepts that then make you better prepared to innovate, because now you know what all the blocks are. Now you know what to use. And so we do that with crowdsourced challenges, and that's really our emphasis on open innovation.
Yeah, I mean, it's an innovation of innovation itself, which is a bit meta. But I mean, I love what you say, because I guess traditionally, when you talk about, like, let's say it's quantum, whatever the thing is, I don't know. I'm not very good at physics. What did you say? Quantum what?
quantum sensors.
Quantum sensors. Okay. Quantum doodads. Quantum sensors. In the past, you probably would have had to like post a job for someone who has experience in quantum sensors, and then you hire them, but you really only need them for a very small project. So, I mean, it makes sense that it's easier to have someone come in on contract. And so is that how this all came to be? Your focus on this crowdsourcing and open talent?
Yeah, well, we got our start in open innovation. Our organization's been around for just about 10 years now. And when we started, it was pilots using communities like Incentive and Topcoder and Yet2, which used communities of really people in the public, but they would post challenges out to solve hard problems, right? And we use that because we were finding that to be really successful. And it wasn't until later that we kind of took a step back and realized why it was so important because of this technology boom, because of all these things. But it was kind of like the right tool at the right time. We're having this new problem, finding all these technologies and leveraging them. And then we're seeing these communities. And then that we were getting these amazing results. But then we also noticed that some of the communities were actually using the expertise of the crowd to do work. So Topcoder would post a bunch of challenges, but then they would also go hire some of those people in their community to help stitch things together, to run challenges themselves. And we started to see this overlap. And there's this great study done by Upwork and Edelman Intelligence where they really show this Venn diagram of open or crowdsourcing communities, gig platforms, and freelance platforms where these websites are gathering members and starting to utilize them and matching them with gigs, work, or over here challenges. And that it was really these matching platforms that were the magic. And they started gathering people with a passion and facilitating and kind of lowering the friction of that matching. So it's kind of, I always equate it to, say, Uber, right? Uber, the reason it's so successful is it is a master matching algorithm. It is basically taking people who have a car and want to make some money and matching it to people who need a ride. And they do that with high trust and low friction. In other words, I click on a few buttons. I've already set everything up. I can trust who I get in there because of what the way they screen their drivers. And that's what people are looking for in everything. When they're looking for the latest and greatest tech, they're looking for, how do I do this, but as easy as possible? And how do I find that skill or that technology with the least amount of friction, the least number of steps, the least amount of money, and with the highest amount of trust? How can I trust that that works? How can I trust that I'm not going to give away my intellectual property? All of those things. And over, these platforms are starting to tamp down those barriers and to make that more of a friction-free exchange. And we just started seeing that happen in the open talent community. And so in our latest contract we put together, we included not just platforms that could do open innovation challenges, but platforms that could access what we call open talent. And we've been able to find some really amazing experts. We're doing a project with NIST right now. And they have a challenge where they're basically working on differential privacy, right? So we've got these, and it's moving that entire research forward incredibly. But the folks who are developing the solutions, they're kind of in this next elimination phase, and what they're doing is implementing their algorithms in software so they can see what works best. But some of them are not experts in software, and they needed some mentoring in software. So we turned over here and we used the contract to find, I think it was through Maven, which is a community of 400,000 experts. And we were able to find someone who could actually be that mentor. And they're doing that right now. I looked up their resume. They used to be a presidential fellow. I'm like this is an amazing person to find, period.
Yes.
But that's just it. Like this matching of who you can find is always a surprise, both in the open innovation area as well as in the open talent area. There's just this really interesting magic that happens in terms of large numbers and communities and crowds.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, It kind of reminds me of like this very simple example, but when I was in university, we spent hours photocopying journal articles because there was no other than microfiche. It was all, and now the students going through vet school are like just pouring through like thousands of articles to try to find the relevance. So it sounds to me like it's a little bit like that instead of photocopying, searching. And so I had that question. I have a two-part question. So first, who are these people? Are these people who have a full-time job and they're doing this on the side? Are there companies that are now building companies based on a business model to do open talent? And that's 4 questions. And my last one is like, kind of tell the difference between open innovation, and open talent, because I think there's terms a lot of people don't really know. And for people out there who just joined us, I'm interviewing Steve Rader, who is the program manager for the crowdsourced innovation program lab, the tournament lab at NASA. And we're talking about finding people with specific expertise and diversity that you can kind of bring into projects to kind of complete them in that whole ecosystem, which is so fascinating to me. And so people out there watching might be like, I'd love to take on a side project. I have expertise in quantum doodads. So tell me more about that, like the logistics of how that works.
Absolutely. Let me start at the last question, because I think that's a good basis. When we say open, the word open simply means going beyond your normal team. So if you have a small team in a company, an open activity may actually simply be going to the larger group, right? So going from 10 people to 50 people and asking, hey, does anyone know how this works? Or, you can do a challenge, but obviously at that level, you probably just ask the question. You can do that at a company level, at 3,000, at 5,000, however big your company is. And a lot of organizations have open innovations internal to their organization. So we have one at NASA called NASA at Work, which is a community of about 30,000 NASA employees and contractors that basically answer the call. And it's really great at cutting across silos, because now you're asking, does anyone know how to do this? And people spring to life when they're asked, right? But if you just look to try to cut across those silos outside of that's really hard. So open is simply going outside. And to its extreme, going outside is going out to the entire global public. And we do that in our challenges. So open innovation is trying to solve problems with that, typically through an incentivized prize, right? I always talk about the algorithm, matching algorithm. Prize challenges are a magic algorithm for finding the unsuspecting innovation that you didn't know even existed to solve a hard problem. Now, there may be AI that can do that later in life when it matures, but right now, prize challenges are really good at that. However, there's a formula to it. You can really screw that up and get like 10,000 submissions and not know how to cull through them. Right. You can create more work. And these organizations, these platforms that we've found and dealt with, we have a contract that has 19 different vendors on it. They know how to do that. They formulate the problem so that they get just that right amount of participation of breadth and depth, so that you get that creativity, you get people to connect the dots without getting the big signal to noise ratio problem, right? Which is get a lot of stuff that's not relevant, right? And you have to wade through all that.
So does that go back to what you were saying before, which is like the principles of creative problem solving or design thinking, where you're really articulating the challenge? So it sounds like you're front loading that, right? So that you don't have to, like you said, sift through the people who haven't even thought about that, who went straight to the whiteboard.
Exactly. You want to spell out the problem and the criteria of what you're trying to match, and then make sure that your submissions come in so that they fit that. But there's a whole bunch around design. What's the right incentive? What's the right phasing? How many awards? How long do you have? And all of those, we actually have our vendors kind of be the experts, because each crowd is different. A top coder crowd is very different from a Kaggle crowd.
And those are both open talent or open innovation platforms.
Open innovation platforms, right?
And I've got the one here. Sorry, I just put that one up. This nasa.gov/solve. That would be where people could go to look for the challenges at NASA. Is that right?
Exactly. We post all of our open innovation challenges across the board on nasa.gov/solve, and then for the government, we post those on challenge.gov, which I think you've got as well.
Yeah, throw that up there.
So we very much want to engage in the public. I'll just say open talent is really about finding an individual that can come in and help you. So it's less about a problem and trying to get a bunch of solutions, and rather, I'm trying to understand this. I need some help. and finding that exact right person without having to go hire them, like you say, because you don't know, like hiring is really hard and expensive, and you don't always need to hire somebody. Sometimes you need a phone call or you need 2 weeks with someone, and that's what this is targeted at. Because things are changing so rapidly, it's a much better way to kind of find those resources. So let me go to who is the crowd.
Yes.
The crowd is everyone. Like it is like there is no like one, like people like to think, what's the out of work engineer in their garage? Yes, but it's also the postdoc that worked for 10 years in some high level lab doing cutting edge research and realized one day, I'm never going to be the lab manager, so I need to go get a real job, right? There's a whole study there that says something like 40,000 of those people happen a year that have to move out of the postdoc world because they realize there's not enough room at the top. And they're highly skilled and highly trained and highly passionate about something, and yet they have to go get a job as a safety engineer, or I'm not trying to disparage safety engineers. That's a wonderful area, but they're doing something that is not their core. And a lot of people do that, and they will actually set up a biology lab in their garage just to keep doing their passion, because that's what they care about. We've found people to be surprising, and what we find is that they're very the actual interaction with these open innovation challenges actually changes their trajectory. There was a woman in Australia, her name's Lauren Fell, and she was a psychologist, mid-20s, and she put in on one of our contests on Freelancer, where we were trying to get a storyboard for a video to explain this RFID project, kind of nerdy project. We were trying to get it a little bit more plain spoken. She won that. We implemented the video. It was great. I noticed on another, we were looking for radiation shielding ideas using origami concepts, and she submitted on that. And I was like, this is a psychologist. What is she doing? And I started, and she was using PowerPoint to kind of show these shapes and do this. It was really hard. Well, then 2 or 3 months later, I noticed that she wins this CAD competition for another, I don't know, it was an arm or a scoop or something, but I noticed she now submitted computer-aided design files, like 3D models. And then the next contest I see on another platform, on GrabCAD, she actually submitted photographs of a 3D printed rock sorter for the moon. And she's gone on to win competitions with soft robotics and with robotics for lunar lifters. Well, I got to meet her in Australia, and it turns out, like, because she won that first one, she got just really interested in it. So she taught herself CAD, and she taught herself to get how to 3D print, and she taught herself robotics. And now she's working on a PhD in quantum physics. Like, people are amazing, and I think part of that is when you activate the creative pieces, they suddenly realize what they can do, and they then start stretching themselves. And the thing about open innovation challenges that's really just magical is that they are almost exclusively a place where you can fail with no consequences. So think about that for a second. If I'm taking a course and I try something and I fail, I get a bad grade. If I'm at work and I try something and I fail, I'm probably going to get dinged for that. But contests allow people to kind of stretch themselves because the consequences are zero. Like, they're the time you spent. Okay, you wasted your time, but you might get feedback. You might be able to build on those ideas. And we've actually had researchers
get a degree in PhD in quantum physics. Eventually, right?
We on that de-identification one that NIST is doing, we had one of the researchers that had been working in this area submit something totally different. And she said, what I loved about this way versus what we were doing before is my boss didn't get to tell me what I could and couldn't do. And so I was able to actually submit an idea that I've had for a long time, but that was considered too high risk. And we forget, in the R&D world, they have limited budgets, and they're going to go with what's the most successful. And almost always that trade-off is going to give you incremental increases in performance not the big increases. So we see that all the time. So it's
Yeah, that's I love
a lot of questions there. So did I get
I
them
know,
all?
sorry. Yeah, I think so. I have ADHD, so I've forgotten what my questions were already. But yeah, I just wanted to like find out more about the people and how that works. Because for a company that thinks, oh, maybe I'd like to try that, how I'd even start that, it sounds like there's many platforms available that they could go to and get mentorship and how to start something like that. And then on the other side, for the people, it really struck me the aha or epiphany about how it takes away the risk of failure. Because what I talk about when I'm writing my book about how you can step more into your creativity, number one is that fear of failure of ourselves, but then fear of failure externally. And I just have this image of this Australian lady who I don't know what she looks like, but I have an image of her like walking into the sea, like she's walking in and her toes are in. And then now she's like swimming out in the ocean, but she knows that she can get back to shore, right? Because she's done this incremental change. So that's a fantastic point. And I really love that idea of no consequences to failure. And you are putting those constraints, which can be helpful for creativity because you're asking for a specific project, but you're taking away the constraints that restrict us for judgment, like your boss or, failing a course or whatever. So, I love that.
And it's so interesting too, because on that failure equation, which we know is so crucial to innovation, right, is that ability to fail, because it's through those failures you learn and you go. There's that individual piece that I just explained, but there's also the aggregate piece. And this is what's so valuable for organizations, because when you run a crowdsourced challenge, you're effectively getting, say you get 200 submissions and only one winner. Well, that's 199 failures that you didn't pay for.
Yes.
And you're really getting innovation there. And if you look across those, oftentimes we get people to say, the value here is what we saw in all of the submissions. And sometimes they'll actually purchase the losing submissions for that reason and have the intellectual property. This idea of failure is so integral. And there's a great story I tell on this, which is Roche Diagnostics. They were trying this stuff out. And they had worked on this diagnostic machine for 15 years, and they could not get the right quality sensors for the intake. And proprietary research going on with partners being brought in, literally millions of dollars going in over those years. They were trying out an incentive. They ran a 60-day contest. And at the end of that 60 days, not only had they solved the problem, they'd gotten the performance they needed, it came independently from two different solvers, which means it existed out there. They just didn't know about it. But what blew
basically two components that they had to put together to get this solution,
it was,
or two answers?
The solution existed and two different people knew it existed, and they both
Gotcha.
Yeah. But what really blew them away was when they looked at all of the submissions that weren't going to actually work. Everything they had tried in 15 years was actually proprietary research was replicated in 60 days. So compressing that failure cycle is hugely important too, and I think we lose that sometimes.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Steve, we have to wrap this up as much as I could talk for hours, because I'm so fascinated by this newer idea of open talent, which is where we met through this community, and finding out how to stay relevant, because this is the way of the future. I mean, companies are not dumb. They're going to see the writing on the wall, 199 failures they don't have to pay for. So I think people need to know that this is where the future is going of work, if it's not complete or partial, and that we need to use creativity and some initiative. We need to take initiative to kind of take control of our own learning and our own path, because if you don't do it, you're kind of going to be looking around going, is this it in 20 years? But you have this opportunity now that was never there before to taste different things. And like your Australian example is a perfect one. So thank you so much for joining us. I have your the NASA website here. You can connect with Steve to talk more about open talent, open innovation, and the program at NASA, as well as Steve can come and speak. He's also a speaker. And I'm not going to forget, sometimes I forget. So we are a little bit over time. I hope that's okay with you, Steve. That's okay with me. But you selected, so in the truth or dare section, you selected a truth. I sometimes forget. Were you hoping I'd forget?
Maybe.
So do you have a story you could share of an experience that was maybe a bit embarrassing, or something that that you want to share with us?
Sure. So when I very first started at NASA, I was a contractor with a company called Barrios Technology, and I had been there about a month and a half, and we all took this training on what it means to be in mission operations and be a flight controller, and there were all these things you learned about in terms of superstition and tradition and all these great things. And at the time, the gentleman who led that entire organization was the legend Gene Kranz, who was the, if you watch Apollo 13, he's the guy in the Stars and Stripes vest with the buzz cut. A legend then, still a legend today. He wrote Houston, We Have a Problem. Really amazing man. Very stern, very all business, and very intimidating. And we had a party at the end of our class, and he would always attend those parties to meet all of the new people. And right before that meeting, someone had made an offhanded comment that, oh, you're going to get to go to the party and meet Gene Kranz, and you'll get to shake his hand and rub his head. And with that crew cut, it was just this visual image. I never really processed it. But when it came time for the actual party, he came in and walked across and I was standing with the guy who led the class. And so he was coming in to kind of say hi to him. And there was kind of loud music. And so he came and he faced me to introduce himself, and he stuck his hand out and he leaned forward at the same moment. And all of the things came together in my head that, oh, I see what I should do. And so I shook his hand and rubbed his head. And I said, hi, Mr. Kranz. I believe I'm supposed to shake your hand and rub your head for good luck. And he said, no. And he turned around and walked away. And everyone I was standing with turned white, and we spent the weekend thinking we were going to get fired. But it turns out this is actually the way I met my wife, because a year later, she joined NASA, and the guy who ran the class, she was going to be the one organizing the party. And the guy who ran the class said, you only have to invite one person, and it's Steve Rader, because he is now a legend because he rubbed Gene Kranz's head. So
are you? I was like, that's such an amazing story. I'm like, oh no, you didn't rub his head. You didn't rub his head. And you rubbed his. Are you the only person who's ever rubbed his head? You know, was that like a total joke?
I don't know that, but I don't know of anyone else who has, other than probably his relations. But he's an amazing man, and he has a great sense of humor. So he's wonderful.
But just, I can't imagine like the stern, military type. But did you tell the guy who made the joke? What did he or she say?
It was my boss. Oh yeah.
Oh, it's your boss.
Everybody heard about it. Trust me, everyone heard about that. Yeah.
Well, that is an amazing truth. I think that might be the best truth story I've heard so far on Creative Lifescaping. So thank you so much, Steve. I really enjoyed our conversation. I think it's really helpful for people to know where this is going. And there's probably people already out there Googling challenge.gov and nasa.gov/solve. And I hope that helps other people find more creativity in their life. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah. Okay, take care.